I can give you guys some context of questions that you're asking about who we are. So Kingdom Causes Bellflower is a nonprofit, and we got started a little over 20 years ago. Bellflower once had the record for most churches per capita. We're like not that big of a city, but we have over 50 78,000. I think it's more actually. But it was like 50, there was a tagline of like 50 churches and no jails, like back in the day. That was one of like the city's official taglines. Yeah. It's not the case anymore, but we have a lot of churches, and those churches, some people, a lot of the Reformed churches got together in the late 90s because they recognized people were coming into their places of worship. It didn't matter if they were coming because they wanted to go to church. They went because it was a safe place and they were needing help, right? Yeah. And deacons and elders were kind of, at these different churches, were stuck on like, okay, some of us, we only have like a little church kitchen and we're giving them the canned food from there because that's all we got. And we feel like that's not enough. And then other churches were like, hey, we're just paying for people's rents, which is awesome. But we also don't know if that's like, are we enabling somehow? Like, what are we doing? We were kind of all over the place. And so those churches got together and said, what does it mean for us to set aside our theological differences, our all of the things that churches like to separate on? Yeah. How do we set that aside, partner with each other, partner with the school district, law enforcement, and the city government to really tackle the issues that are in our community? So Kingdom Causes Bellflower got birthed out of that, and that's where we are today, right? So we are a nonprofit, and it's been like full transparency, like trying to figure out, we see ourselves as an extension of the church, but church has changed a lot in the 20 years, right? Like, especially the last 5 years have been really tough, and so it's been really encouraging and hopeful to hear from those of you guys in the network that are doing really cool church-based stuff. Something we struggle with as a nonprofit, and it might just, I don't know if you share this sentiment or not, but my ache is that the local church would rise up and do more, so that you need less nonprofits. And one of the things that I always sit with is like, have we done too much? Like, have we somehow, as a nonprofit, become a thing that you donate to and refer to, and it's let the local church off the hook a little bit more? We grapple with that because sometimes there are things that we're uniquely positioned to leverage for the community, and we, as a nonprofit. But my heart, it would be to see the churches rise up to do more things. And as we sat in the room earlier, like there are so many cool things that churches are doing. That like Charlie joked, like, what would it look like for that to all be in one city? It'd be like crazy. So some of the things that we are known for, we have a social enterprise called Good Soil Industries. It's a landscape company. We hire men and women that are either currently homeless or coming out of homelessness, coming out of the prison system. We mow lawns. We've had about 250 people come through that program over the last 10 years. We are a homeless service provider. We do a lot of partnership, not only with the churches, but with the county, with our cities, trying to do our best to leverage those resources. And that actually got birthed out of a homeless task force. That was a bunch of people that God had put like a burden and a passion for caring for our homeless neighbors on a lot of our different hearts, and we kind of found each other, and that's where our programs were birthed out of that as well. But at our core, we are a community development organization, and so Becky is going to share more. I'm happy to answer questions about KCB later, but I really don't feel like that's the focus. What we're going to talk about tonight is this idea of asset-based community development and how it relates to your church. And hearing you guys and knowing that like you are at the stage where you've identified that Santa Ana is like your mission and like where you want to be. I think some of the stuff that Becky's going to talk about tonight will be really interesting to hear, like how does that play in with as you guys do planning and get ready to launch and all of that. So Becky's the director of community development, and she's awesome, and we will kind of tag team, but she's like the brains behind a lot of this stuff. So I'm Chrissy.
Thanks, boss. Okay, so I'm really going to try and tailor this towards like what you guys are doing, and then kind of also just kind of talk on a broad scale of who we are, how we do this type of thing. Have you guys heard of the phrase asset-based community development? And it's totally fine, okay? Because this is kind of a...
I didn't when I first started.
What's an asset?
Exactly. It's something that is like something, it might be something that you have, right? We consider like homes assets, right?
Resources.
But it
gifts.
also is gifts, talent, stuff that you have in yourself, right? There's individual assets that we have. We talk about community assets that we have like in the community that people bring, maybe that businesses bring, that organizations bring, that clubs bring, all of that kind of stuff. So our Kingdom Causes is under this model of asset-based community development. The opposite of that really is needs-based development, right? So it's saying, okay, we're going to this community and we're identifying that there's this need and this need and this need and this need, and then therefore we are going to come in and bring a resource to help. Instead, what asset-based community development does is it says, instead of looking from the perspective of what's missing, we look from the perspective of what we already have. One of the values of Kingdom Causes Bellflower is that we believe that God has placed most, if not all, of the resources necessary in Bellflower already to bring about its transformation. They're there, right? They're already there, right? We often talk about in the world of like development, when we think about missions and when we go to different places, we often think that we have to bring something, and we forget, and we hurt people by not recognizing the fact of all the strengths and the resources that are already there, that sometimes just need to be identified and need to be encouraged and need to be emphasized, right? So we look at this even in terms of our homeless neighbors. We do a lot of work with our unhoused neighbors, right? And so we think they have assets too. Who are they as individuals? Even if it's being on the street, one of the major assets that they have is survival skills, right? That's translatable, right, into the world. Our Good Soil employees, right, a lot of them have some substance abuse issues. That means that they hustled at some point in life, right? Because they had to get what they needed when their body needed it, right? How do we take that skill and transfer that to the work environment, right? So that's a lot of what we're doing. We're saying that these aren't deficits, right? But these are things that we know that God can take and use for good, that there isn't a mistake in this. And so how can we help you identify those things and create a community around you to support that? Okay?
Wow. That's incredible, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I think this stuff is kind of fun, and thinking about you guys as I'm guessing you don't have a location yet, right?
No, not yet.
Anything? Yeah. So as you think about that, like,
Is that the camera? Can I put this stuff right here so she could just capture it?
Maybe.
That's pretty interesting. I would be
that's fine.
interested in how you guys do that.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Okay. My goal is really that you have some practical tools that you'll come away from with this, because again, this is stuff that we try and do. I say try because it's messy.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And we are not good sometimes at this. Like, just to be honest, sometimes it is a lot easier to just be a service provider than it is to really mobilize the community to do this. Right? Because when you mobilize the community, right? When you're mobilizing the community, that's a whole lot of conversations.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot of, well, you didn't show up for this when you said you were going to show up. Oh, because it's your volunteering, right? You know, this kind of thing. When it's like, no, this is your job. You show up, you have to take care of these things.
Yeah.
But we do believe that this is gospel centered, right? Of community being mobilized so that we can experience a greater element of shalom. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, right? Peace and wholeness and those kind of things. So I've kind of identified this as asset-based churching. I don't think that that's an appropriate term, but we're gonna go with it tonight, okay? just stick with it.
You're running the show.
And that's right. I'm gonna do presentations and have you in the background all the time.
Hold up a sign. A giant face.
I'll buy you like Starbucks or something that you want.
There you go.
I won't just make you do that for free. But I can't spend much.
There you go.
So this is a little bit different for you guys, right? Because when we think about asset-based churching, I'm thinking about the assets of the people that are a part of this, as well as what you have in your neighborhood and even the land and the place where you gather and where you worship, right?
Yeah.
For you guys, how many of you, so it's the two of you, how many else is a part of who's going to be?
Like the core team?
Yeah.
So we have like our families.
Yes.
For like 10 people in total.
Okay.
Something like that.
So some of these things that we talk about, I'd love for you guys to do together as you think about planting in the community that you are, and we'll get to that, okay? This is just encouragement. This is not. Charlie, are you gonna make sure that they did this? Okay, because we have to be accountable to it too. Okay, so asset-based community development. Some of the principles of that is essentially everyone has gifts, right? Everyone has something to contribute. Everyone cares about something, and that passion is his or her motivation to act. Okay? I love these principles because they seem very Bible-centered,
Yeah.
right? When we talk about it, Scripture talks about gifts, right? Whether they're spiritual gifts or whatever they are, we have those.
Yeah.
Everybody has something to contribute. We all make up the body of Christ.
Sure.
And when it's defined, it is body parts that are defined,
Yep.
right? So I cannot, if I am the feet, I am nothing without the eyes, right? I am nothing without my knees that help move my feet, right? So we all have something to contribute to that. Our homeless neighbors have something to contribute to that. You're talking about in the community in Santa Ana, there's gang populations, right? They have something to contribute to the community, right? They have an ability to gather and rally people, right? And win people over.
Yep. Evangelism.
That's a skill, yes! That's a talent, that's a skill, right? That Jesus can use that.
Exactly.
Right? But we need to know that we can, like, people can say, hey, this is beautiful the way I'm created, right? And this is a skill that I have, and maybe I wasn't using it for great things before, but God can turn that and use this for good,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
All of us have stories of that in our lives, right? Everyone cares about something, and that passion is his or her motivation to act. I think of, like, that phrase, and I'm not even sure if it's a scripture or not, but because of the love of Christ, but for the love of God, right? Therefore go I.
Yeah.
Right? And whatever it is that I do, because of God's great love for me.
Yeah.
And here we go. And whatever he has placed on my heart, that becomes my passion, right? And therefore I go. Because God has loved me, and therefore I love.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Right.
John.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So when we talk about asset mapping, when we talk about asset-based community development, we talk about it as a treasure hunt. So I'm a social worker, and so in school we talk a lot about needs assessments, right? If you're gonna start a program, if you're gonna start something, you have to do a needs assessment. Is it needed in this community?
Yeah.
That's how I was trained, and it felt right. Until I learned asset-based community development, and then I was like, oh, this feels gospel-centered,
Yeah.
right? Because instead of looking for the needs, I'm looking for the treasures in the community. Because oftentimes we know this, right? Oftentimes people just don't know, number one, maybe what their gifts are. Number two, where to use them. And that there's even an opportunity to use them in their community, right? And so at Kingdom Causes, we want to be those bridge builders, right? That say, oh, you have this gift, that connects with this heart of something going on in the community, right? Sometimes we don't know, so it's treasure hunting, right? As opposed, because we know if you are asking people about what their strengths are, what their talents are, what's good about their community, you will absolutely hear about what's needed in their community too. You do not have to ask. They will get there, right? We're humans, we can't help to talk about the things that aren't going well.
Yeah.
But we do need help to talk about the things that are good, right?
And I think another way to phrase it too is like, what is God already up to? So in Santa Ana, where your building, if you have a building, will be, or whatever that gathering place will be, God's already up to something, right? And so paying attention and coming in with humility to acknowledge like that God's already doing a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
What's our role? Like how do we value add to that? And how do we pay attention leverage and partner, right? So,
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah.
It's coming into the city without the Jesus complex.
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, we're not the saviors.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're just coming alongside others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And loving the city because you
Yeah.
guys do have a love for this
Yeah.
community and that area,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Of
And
course.
then saying, who are you here? We want to get to know you,
Yeah.
right? And we would love to make sure you see Jesus through
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So when we're thinking about that treasure hunting aspect and we're thinking about the individual and the community, right? We're talking with individuals, we want to ask those questions. What strengths do you have, right? What gifts, talents, capacities, talents again, I messed that up and didn't correct it before tonight, don't judge me. Creativities, what different things do you have, right? That you could say, and I'll show you guys an exercise that we use. Not just what strengths do you identify in yourself, but what strengths do other people identify in you? I do therapy as one of my jobs, and one of the things that I always see is it's harder for people to identify their own goodness.
Yeah.
And much easier for them to point it out in other people, right? Or to say, or to compare and be like, oh, I'm just not that good at this or whatever. But we're oftentimes pretty good at seeing it in other people. We're like, no, but you really are good at this, right? So there's a mirroring aspect that we want to be, right?
Yeah.
And that's this next thought here. How can we shine a light or be a mirror of reflection to help people see themselves more clearly? As we think about being leaders of a church, being church planters, right? The people that show up, you guys want to be those people that are that mirror back that says, oh man, you are beautiful in the image of God.
Yeah.
Right? And it's, man, it's because of you just showing up that you are. It's because of the way you love. It's the way you care. It's the way you care for older adults. It's the way, right? We want to be reflectors of that. As leaders in the community, I think especially as pastors in a community or in a church, right?
That's right.
We want to be that reflection. So there is an extra sheet in here that looks like this. It's not attached to the paper clip, or sorry, the stapled handout. This is one of the ways that we get at the gifts that people have in our community, right? So we do an exercise that we typically call head, heart, and hands. Okay, and then I'm on the board of this organization that's called World Renew, so I borrow their things. And so they add a couple things to this exercise, being heals and human connection, okay? So this is one of the things that we go through as a staff too. We put these different signs up when we get together at different trainings that we have, right? And we hold these signs up and we ask people to identify in themselves. What are the gifts of your head? What are the gifts of your heart? What are the gifts of your hands? Right? We ask them to identify this in themselves, and then we ask other people to identify that, and everyone else in the room as well. And we end up with this beautiful collage of all of the gifts that we have in the room, right? Now, what are we thinking about when we do this, right? When we think about gifts of the head, these are the things that people know about, their special knowledge, their expertise. I think you were saying that you're a handyman. Sorry, I forget your first name.
Justin.
Justin. Okay. Like you're a handyman, right? These are, not only do you have the gifts of hands, right, to be able to fix things, but even to understand how. That's not a gift that I have, right? What is that? When we were doing this exercise with our staff at the most recent time, I was just really struck by somebody who identified the gift of the head was somebody that knew history and knew how to connect it to the present. And that was such a gift of the head, right, that they had. We have another ex-military, right? We have a veteran that works for us. He knows optics, right? And he's always kind of like, oh.
Where's my exit?
Where's my exit? How do we get out if there's an emergency, right? We work with homeless neighbors, and our homeless neighbors often have a lot going on, right? And sometimes that creates safety issues, right? Well, he is ready. Right? We often laugh because he has like a rear view mirror on his desk so that he can see all angles wherever he is. That's part of his training. That might be part of his trauma. That's fine because that can be used for good. Right?
That's right.
But those are gifts of the head because he can figure that stuff out. Right? I'll take that on my team.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
When you think about gifts of the heart, these are the things that people care about. What's most important to you? What things like get your heart beating? right? Do you notice that it's like, oh gosh, okay, something is stirring in me as these people are talking, right? When you think about, some of the groups that we met with earlier, when you talk about children, when you talk about pregnant mothers, right? When you talk about immigrants, people recovering substance use, right? People with disabilities, right? All of these things, like these, if your church is passionate about this, if you're passionate about the Latino community, if you are passionate about people that have known the life of gangs their whole life, right? If that's where your heart beats, I'll let God move in that, right? Yeah. But we also want to make sure that we're tapping into the other heart gifts that people have, right? That doesn't mean that you have to be everything to all people, right? Chrissy's a really good boss at this in our organization because she looks at us for the gifts that we have, and when she feels like she's missing it, she makes us do this assessment again, right? And go through this so that we can remember. But if your gift of the heart is something that doesn't fit with what KCB is doing, she wants to connect you with another place that is what they are doing to get connected, right? We recently were talking about, we have these people that are interested in equine therapy, so like therapy with horses. I don't like animals, I'm scared most all of the time. I think they stink, I don't like them, they're not trustworthy. You don't know when they're gonna come at you. I have an issue, and it's fine, because I think God gave me like extra components, like exponential love for people, and he gave the animal love to other people in my office, because there's dogs in my office. But anyways, this is something that I'm like, ooh, there's like 5 people that have come to KCB and said, we want to do this. And so what KCB does is we're like, well, let's pay attention to that. That's more than one person. We're not sure how the Holy Spirit is guiding on this. Now, is KCB going to do equestrian therapy? I hope not. If we are, that's going to be in somebody else's department, right? But what we can do as an organization is be a bridge builder and connect these people together, right? So that they together can start to dream. Can we continue to be a place where these people meet to talk about this? Yes. Can I have one of my interns do a feasibility study on how possible it would be to start this type of ministry? Sure, we will be a part of that, but I don't think we're going to be on horse property. I don't know how God's going to guide. He's silly sometimes if you ask me, and how he does things, right? Gifts of the hands. These are your skills, your talents. What practical skills do you bring that you're good at, that you're proud of? We talk about this with your hands. We're talking about art. We're talking about handyman stuff. We're talking about electricians. We're talking about music. One of our staff members, she goes, I don't know how to do makeup. I can do makeup. And I'm thinking, that is a major gift of the hands, because I don't, and when somebody can do that for me, I'm like, man, I feel good about myself today. Right? There's just something about, that's a gift that she has to offer me. It sounds silly, but it is, right? That's a gift.
Well, and I feel like I love this, I like the hands one, because I think there's a lot of people who have a heart for ministry, but they're like, I'm not called to preach, or I'm not called to be an usher, or whatever. And I think they have gifts that they might not think are spiritual, that God could absolutely use. They just have never maybe considered that as a ministry. Yeah. And so I always think about this with, like, if I said this to my mom or my uncles, they would probably, oh, this is so fluffy. But really, when you get down to it, I'm like, there's skill sets, and God's created us so uniquely. And I bet there's a lot of people in your church plant and in the ministries that might be overlooking things that could be absolutely critical.
Jerry Watts.
Jerry Watts is like, yes.
He is the epitome of gifts of the hands.
He basically did like $20,000 of handyman work for our shelter.
We have a small home. It's not really a small home, but it's a small for like a shelter for families to live temporarily when they're in transition of housing. And we had to do some major overhaul of the property, and this guy Jerry basically owned it. For free. Oh, for free. And he's still, I just emailed him the other day, I'm like, will you consult with our new maintenance coordinator? And he's like, yep. Do you want me to include you on this or not? We're on it right now. I'm like, don't include me. This stresses me out, right? This isn't good. But I think about this too. Our veteran in the office, One of the ways that he loves, right? These are also like your love languages, things like this, right? One of the way he loves is he looks at all of our cars and sees if there's anything that needs to be repaired, right? So I pull up and I have a brake light out, and he says, "Give me your keys," and he goes and he fixes my brake light. Now, that is a task that for me, I'm somebody that deals with some intense anxiety. When I'm trying to do my work, that task of changing my brake light will set me over the edge. Because it's just, it's gonna take me forever because I don't quite understand. And it's not hard, I just don't want to spend time doing that. So Javi loves me well by doing that. It's a game changer for me, right? I think when you're starting off a church, as you get new members, if you can even have them do like a strengths finder, and we'll talk about that, right? Just so that they can come and kind of understanding their strengths in the church, and the church can celebrate that from the very beginning. And then be thinking about that, right? As more people come, or as community hits you up, or whatever it is, right? It's a beautiful opportunity because you don't have 50 people. You don't have 100 people right now, so you have the opportunity to be really invested in that, right?
I just echo that, because what's going to happen is the second you launch, like everything's going to be all about Sundays, right? And like making Sunday happen. It's like a lot of energy is going to be dumped into that. And so it's be so easy to drift away and like you let you guys be the ones doing everything.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, your people they're participating, but they're not like, they're only participating in getting Sundays happen, making Sundays happen, not owning like the strengths and gifts God's already given them. Man, that's good. Like having everybody on board doing that from the beginning.
It's a cool, and do it with your kids. Right, have the kids be a part of this. And see how they change, right? That's what I think is so fun.
I have no idea. I'm so sorry.
It sounds fun.
I don't think it's in, which small group is it?
It's from Purdue.
Because I think.
That's what I thought.
Sweet.
Only Donovan.
Okay, we'll keep going on this. Gifts of the heel. These are things we don't always expand in this, but I kind of like these ideas. Things that people do to stay grounded, right? So what are their spiritual practices, right? We talk about spiritual discipline sometimes that really comes from the Catholic tradition. Beautiful stuff in there, right? Is it meditation? Is it listening to scripture being read over you? Is it walking prayer? What is it? What keeps you grounded? How can we encourage that in you? And how can you help others learn how to do that? That maybe it might become a gift of theirs too as well, or at least something that really keeps them grounded, right?
Yeah.
Gifts of human connection, things people do to stay connected. Now, a lot of these will kind of merge together, right? Chrissy and her husband have an amazing gift of hospitality, and they're great chefs. They are great food providers, but they also do it because of the human connection piece. They're great gatherers, right? All of those gifts kind of fit together. Again, really important. You guys might start off in a house. You might start off in a school chapel or gymnasium or something like that, right? How do you start to, how do you create intimacy in those settings, right? That we can be a part of a group that still is discipling each other, even if we only have this building for 2 hours on a Sunday. Our homes become important. And who has those gifts? Please don't ask people who don't have those gifts to host, because it is not fun for them. Okay, like we gotta be careful with those things, right? We wanna make sure we recognize gifts.
We do this with like sticky notes.
Yeah, we just start posting things up on these faces.
You have to force it sometimes too, because a lot of people will be like, I don't know, God. Which like, yes, like God is, But I think like if like we'll do sticky notes and you make them write at least one, maybe try to get 2 to 3, and just I really encourage it, like as part of your planning and stuff. It's
We've done a big shape of, this looks like a gingerbread man, but we've done a big shape of a human on butcher paper, and we've done it that way as well. People write it in, so gifts of the hands go on the hands, the head, the heart, the heels. Human connection kind of go around the whole thing. But you can do that as well as an exercise. As you do small groups, I love the idea of doing this with like a children's ministry, right? And having them start to think about, wait, how did God
Yeah.
make me uniquely? How do we start to celebrate that in each other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So something I just,
Good.
you can use it in so many ways,
Yeah.
right? And it's not hard. These are two things that we often talk about as personality kind of tests, but I do want to share them kind of for their redeeming value, not just that they're things that tell us these things about ourselves and now we're put in a category, right? Have you guys heard of the Strengths Finder or the Enneagram?
We're actually taking some courses in seminary,
Okay.
pastoral counseling.
Yeah.
Which our professor always talks about the Enneagram.
Yes.
And I got curious, so
I know, because it's a weird
Where-
name,
where-
right?
as I did it. So I think I'm a 4.
Yeah. I'm a 2 with a wing of a 4, they
Yeah.
say, yeah.
4 with like something of an 8.
Yeah, that fits all together the same, yeah. Where are you going to school?
Western Theological Seminary. yeah.
Okay, yep, they're big on the Enneagram
Yeah,
there. Biola's big on
Yeah.
the Enneagram if you go there.
So, but my question would be,
Yeah. Tell us how it messed you up.
because it said a lot of stuff I already knew about myself.
Yeah.
It said 4s are very self-aware. So I was like, all that stuff that they're saying, like I already knew all this about myself.
Oh,
I'm
that's-
already aware.
Yeah,
I'm
but
aware
like,
of this.
but how do you use it, or what do you do?
yeah. Yeah,
You know?
so we, a good friend of ours who is at school in the program for becoming a spiritual director at Biola and seminary there, she kind of owned this Enneagram piece and she really brought it to life for us. This is one of the books that she used. So you can have the Enneagram. The road back to you is really kind of this understanding of what you do with that information now. Because the way our friend Denise took it was she was like, okay, this helps us to know how we relate to God, how we relate to others, how we need to be refreshed. What happens when we get triggered? Are we kind of in the anger side, or are we in the kind of fear side, those kind of things? So what I don't like about these things is that we take it and we just have it sit there.
Yeah.
And then when people say this and you're like, oh, I'm a 4, and you can participate in that conversation, but what the heck does that mean?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That book.
Okay.
That book is one of the things, and just read the section that pertains to you.
Okay.
And I can also give you material. She created this handout that to me is just golden. Because it's one of those things that I'm like, wah, 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 like in social school, we do all of these tests. You're like,
Yeah.
I've always
right?
wondered that too, because I'm like, I've never taken the test.
Yeah.
So I was like, to me, it sounds sort of like a zodiac thing.
Sure, it does.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
sounds like pentagram.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like,
Yeah.
well, I mean,
Yes.
like, yeah, maybe I'm part of this group or whatever,
Yes.
whatever number I may be, but like what at the end, like what does that help me?
I know. Don't box me
It-
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. The way our friend Denise did it, which is really the only reason why I have it up here, is because she restored it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because the language is too out there on that, and I'm like, meh. But like, as she brought it back to what does this mean about my relationship with God?
Yeah.
How I relate to God, how I relate to others.
Like a sustainability piece.
Yeah. And in that, then again, we can be like, oh, that's why this makes me so angry, right? Or that's why this issue, I think particularly of justice issues, that it's like, my heart didn't really get with that, but this is where it's not okay for me, right? Or this is why I need quiet time, and this is why we need to respect other people's quiet time. When they say no, we honor the no. Right? So there's just other ways that you can explore. She lets me give out her handout that she created. It's just like a little booklet thing that kind of just lays it out in a way that I'm like, oh, thanks. Now I don't feel like a nutcase just by like looking at this stuff, right? Same with the Strengths Finder. You can do that test and you can discover what kind of strengths that you have. This book, Living Your Strengths, is what brings it to light for me, because it puts scripture to it. This is scriptures that will resonate with this strength. These are the things we need to be careful of. These are the things that make you a good member of a team when you have these strengths. And so what we do as an organization is with every new employee, we have them do the Strengths Finder. And we have a grid that we keep those Strengths Finder scores on. And we talk about them. We try to talk about them regularly. We try to look at where are our gaps. right? Where do we not have strengths? And can we utilize volunteers in this place? Or do we need to look for staff that has these strengths, not just for a specific position, right? But where are these strengths? How do we celebrate them? How do we make sure that people are being valued for them? And what that means is that we honor and say, can you use this strength here, right? I think oftentimes in church, and this happens all the time, there's this event, everybody volunteer, be there, and there's this terrible guilt complex if you don't show up. That just might be me. I did grow up a good Christian Reformed girl, right? There's a like heavy amount of, Becky, you gotta do better, right? You gotta always be available. But what we often don't do is actually say, well, where's your passion? Right? It might not fit into something we're doing already. Would you want to start it? If not, how can we encourage you to go to this church maybe that has that and you can be a part of it? We love you and we're not in competition, right? So how do we do this well?
I think that's the difficulty part right there, is being able to let go of people to go to other churches.
And that's such a good point. My dream is that we as churches in an area, right? Because even in Santa Ana, I'm sure there's a few other churches, right, that exist. How can we come in? You guys are planting. How do you complement already what's going on in there? Right? And we'll get to that in a little bit. How do you celebrate what they're doing? And how do you say, hey, maybe where are your strengths? And maybe does that shape how we do our ministry here, right? Bellflower has so many churches. We don't all need children's programs to be hitting it out of the park. Why can't these 5 churches send their kids to this church for the children's program? Because it's excellent. In the meantime, this church has an amazing ministry with older adults. And so why don't we ask the people that are visiting people in this church to visit people of this church too? Doesn't mean you change your home church, it's just that we be church together. Right? That's my dream. Is that we can do that and we can say, man, you know what, that church is excellent at working with the homeless population. Like, they have figured out how to do that well. We don't know how to do it, and we're a little scared. But can we come and support you at Saturday mornings when you have your homeless neighbors there for breakfast and showers? How do we partner with you to say, thank you for what you're doing, how can we support you in that? That's my dream for churches.
We talked about earlier today, like, this sense of competition and scarcity that I was saying, at least from the nonprofit and maybe from the ministry side, is a daily battle to shut down our ego, our pride, and approach the day with humility and not see the other church, the other nonprofit as a competitor, but really to take a deep breath and like try to figure out, what are they good at? How do we not reinvent the wheel? And how do we keep our pride in check with that?
That's
we don't have it figured out.
That's funny because it seems so practical, but yet it's not practice. Because obviously the reason is theological differences, and because of that, churches don't work together. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think it's something very important, and it's probably something that needs to be talked about more often, right? Because just you saying that kind of like, wait, why isn't that a thing? It's kind of like it should be something that should be already happening, but it's not, you know? And it's crazy when you mention it, like, wait, hold up, why isn't that happening?
That seems kind of like the, but
It's hard.
It should be natural, right? But
it should be.
Like if we go to a concert or like a conference, like we're all from different churches, we all consider each other brothers and sisters, we make friends. But then like when we go back to our churches, it's just like, oh no, that's that church over there, that's that church over there, you know, we're here. And it's just like,
and God forbid if you have street parking and they take your street parking, right? Because you're so nearby each other. Or we had this is, I go to church in Bellflower, and there are 2 churches within like 100 yards of 3 churches. And so during COVID, we're worshiping outside. My church does not have a strong worship team, right? The church across the street sure does, and that drove me crazy. That's all we heard. But could you think maybe we would join together for that? No. Why not? We're all doing this together.
We might lose our members to that.
Right?
Yeah.
It's hard stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's ego things, right? And it's not easy stuff to set
And we forget
aside.
that this is the Lord's church.
Okay?
It's the Lord's chips.
The Lord's Church. You know, the funny thing is, the church I grew up in was called the Lord's Church. So.
They were the most holy.
Yeah. That's crazy because when you think about that, you're like, we're all the church together, and so
Mm-hmm.
to fear losing people,
I know.
is like,
I know.
is it your church or the Church of Jesus Christ?
Right.
Yeah, right. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's a struggle for us as a nonprofit.
All the
and
time.
yeah, and how to it really is a daily, like, how do I focus on God,
Mm-hmm.
be able to be excited and
Mhm.
see somebody else's success if they're doing good. Now if they're being like crappy, like that's like
Have
Yeah.
you
celebrating,
guys
but-
gotten any pushback from any of the churches in the community or anything?
In regards to what?
to what we
Just
do.
anything? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So, okay. We have to remember that it's not just denominations, there's a lot of political stuff
Yeah,
that's
oh,
happening
yeah,
in
of course.
churches, right?
Yeah.
So kingdom causes were an interesting kind of balance here,
Mhm.
right? So I think from the political spectrum, if I can go there, this is where we get some flack from churches too, right?
Yeah.
When I think about it, good soil, really loved by our staunch right-wing
Yeah,
Republicans,
course.
right? Because we are giving jobs.
They are
Yeah.
picking themselves up by their
Yes,
bootstraps.
we
Yeah.
are giving jobs, right?
Faith-based.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, exactly. They also are like, you're being way too nice to those homeless neighbors,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Why aren't they getting jobs? There's
Yeah.
job signs everywhere,
Mhm.
right? And then you say, well, will you hire them? Okay,
Yeah.
but anyways,
Exactly. Exactly. Right?
I mean, that's about
Exactly.
That's about the best. Here, there. Oh, touche. Never mind.
Yeah, right.
Here's $5.
Here's your check.
for our left side, right? For more liberals, they're like, yeah, man, the relationships that you have with your homeless neighbors, that's great, right? Just don't really want them in our neighborhood, maybe.
Yeah.
But good job.
Yeah.
But we don't want that, right? So at Kingdom Causes, we can kind of straddle that a little bit, which is weird. It's weird a little bit, right? Because
Mhm.
we can kind of like live in these two camps that often show up in our churches as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
And so then some of those things are things that from churches, oftentimes we're never doing enough to get the
Yeah.
homeless neighbors off of their property.
Yeah.
That's something we're never doing really great at. Good soil, you have to imagine this, right? The employees turn over every 6 months, if not sooner than that, right?
Mhm.
That means training people again. Just because they're doing landscaping, mowing lawns, it doesn't mean they know what they're doing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? We're not turning a profit on this. Liability is incredible for this type of
Like
work,
that.
right?
Mhm.
Okay, like we're not doing a lot of like making a ton of money. Plus, you have all these people that are. Sometimes we mistake weeds for flowers.
Yeah.
And people don't like us for that
Yeah.
because we cut off their flowers
Yeah.
that they thought were weeds, right? So,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, you
yeah.
know, so we'll get those kind of things, and then we're like talking with churches. We're like, but you understand our mission still, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It might not be A+ work, but that mission is A+.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see
Right?
your money.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's crazy because that's also some attention that we're gonna have to face because, like for us, our church, you know, we're in Linwood, and man, if I'm being real, dude, a lot of times, you know, because we had to leave the RCA and stuff like that, right?
Mhm,
And we tried going to other denominations, very
Mhm.
conservative, reformed denominations, and
mhm.
they would accuse us because of our work of being CRT and social justice
Sure.
workers and things like that. So it's like you want people to do stuff right in the hood and
Mhm.
less resourced areas, but then when you do the work,
Mm,
then you're accused of
Totally.
all these things, right? So it's like if you really, like for more conservative people, like if you really have a problem with all this, like this agenda, you know where it's happening. It's happening in under-resourced areas. We need more biblically conservative people in these areas to not only provide for the needs of the people, but also share the gospel too. You know what I mean? So, and if you're just leaving it to the hands of more left-leaning people, then you're just not dealing with the problem. You know? And so it's like to face that tension between, okay, look, these are the people who we really do not agree with, you know, like politically, theologically, but they're doing the work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if we come alongside them, then we're like that at these kind of CRT kind of people. But if we don't do nothing, then it's like,
Yep.
who do we please, right? And then at the end, we're just pleasers of God, right?
Yeah, that's it.
That's what we
Who
got.
cares
Right?
what other people are thinking?
Right.
That common grace aspect of showing love to the community is missing in a lot of the camps that we come from, the Reform side, right?
Yeah.
A lot of common grace is missing. So
Yeah.
I'm just really preparing my heart with all this training for all that kind of stuff, because we've already gotten a taste of
Sure.
the backlash,
Sure.
and it sucks that it comes from the people who we're aligned with theologically. You know what I mean?
We totally, that resonates. We run into like, we are too religious or too whatever for
Yeah.
a lot, and then not enough for
Mhm.
others, and sometimes it is.
Too
it can
religious
be
for the
lonely
left
in
and
there.
too left for the right.
Why don't you pray with your neighbors as you meet with them?
Right?
Well,
We do.
But they're
it's
unregenerate and you
but
can't.
I know. I'm sorry. We're
Just stay
trying
with
to
Jeremy's
get.
We do it when it's like,
When it's but it's like, well, we're actually trying to get them an ID, because without that, they're gonna get arrested. I
Yeah.
don't know. That felt like Jesus' work too.
Yeah, exactly.
And as we
right.
walk away, God bless
Yeah.
Joseph. You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, like.
Yeah. Mhm.
But are we evangelizing in the work that we do?
Mhm.
No. But will they know that we're Christians by our love? I hope so.
I mean, the work is evangelistic in itself. you know,
Sure.
It's a
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christian organization.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind
Yeah.
of a given.
Yep, yep. Those tensions are out there. I think what Chrissy and I have been struck by is just the need for
Yeah.
prayer. That need for ongoing, and not just talking to God, but just
Mhm.
really listening together.
Yeah.
And where is the Spirit guiding us in that? So that
Mhm.
we know that we are being led by the Spirit and
Yeah.
not by an agenda of ours,
Mhm.
of funding of anybody else's that we may or may not get,
Mhm.
or of people's opinions that sometimes are really loud
Yeah.
and can be really hurtful and
Yeah.
hard.
yeah, especially in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Just, lots of tears.
Yeah. I could,
We'll
Lots
be
of
praying for
tears.
you guys.
Yeah. When you are feeling like you are lonely in that, hit up Kingdom Cause Bellflower. We'll take you to lunch.
I'll take you on that. I'll be hungry one day.
Yeah. The Bible told me to feed you if you are, so I got you. Okay, this is something for property, if you own property, right? So just if and when that happens for your church, don't miss what an asset that can be,
Yeah.
okay? And even if you guys are meeting in a home, right? Don't miss what an asset that can be for people, right? Of what it means to offer a safe place.
Yeah.
Not just for people that are coming to worship with you on a Sunday, but for your community that says
Yeah.
something's different in this home.
Mhm.
Let them feel the Spirit there,
Yeah,
right? Let them
amen.
come and feel that. When you get a building, come talk to us. We have all kinds of ideas. Okay. All right, so treasure hunting in the community. Now, this is kind of, I think, a sweet spot that you guys can hit right now as you
Mhm.
think about where are we going to plant? And
Yeah.
what does this look like? And what is our community about? We're from this area. Do we know our neighborhoods,
Mhm.
right? So we've talked about this a little bit, even in this conversation already. But these things that when you're treasure hunting in a community, we want to ask, who is already doing good work here,
Yeah.
right? Who's already doing it? That might mean finding the churches in your community
Yep.
and saying, hey, what's gone well here, right? What are you still feeling are areas that you've had a hard time kind of in ministry with? Is there a way that we can support that as we start this church here?
Mhm.
That's transformational.
Yeah.
Talk about a question that I haven't heard asked,
Mhm.
right? As we're planting, it's more like, man, you're coming into my town. I don't know, maybe they'll respond that way. I
Mhm.
don't know. We'll see what God opens up.
We've heard something like that before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right? How do we partner well, better? That's what we're talking about.
Mhm.
What connections can we make to strengthen the collaborations in the community? We're going to talk about how you kind of find some of these things, but what's already happening there? And that might mean, hey, you have somebody in your congregation that is, I don't know, a nurse, right? And we're recognizing that there's this health center maybe on the corner or whatever, and they're having a hard time with mentoring their nurses. Would that one be willing to mentor one of them, right? As they start a new job, maybe it's in a low-income community, right? Just what is it where you have a nurse in your community and maybe that's not something where she or he can use her skills in that in the church maybe, but how do we connect them to things where that is going well? That's Jesus' work, right? How do we highlight the work of others? This is a big thing too, not just highlighting ourselves, but how do we highlight the work of others, right? And recognize that what other people are doing in our community is good. So maybe that means on your social media, you celebrate somebody else instead of what's going on at your church, right? We do this thing where we know that our homeless neighbors don't just become homeless by happenstance. There's typically a history, right? We really believe that a part of that starts with the families, and it's a lot of our neighbors will identify some part of home that was really unhealthy, right? That kind of spiraled into what led to them being on the streets. It might have led them into foster care, and we know that people in foster care have a higher percentage rate of becoming homeless, right? It might be that there was drug use in the home, right? And so that's what we were introduced to, so it became something that was familiar, and then it became hard to stay because nobody wanted me around when I was using, and so the street became easy, right? For that, there's always a history. Well, we don't work with kids, we don't work with youth, right? The only place that we have children is at our home, Margaret's house for families. But there's Olive Crest in our community that does foster and adoptive care work. They have a program used to be called Safe Families, and now it's Strong Families. And what they do is they say, hey, we don't want more kids to end up in the foster care system. We don't want families here. So if you're going through a stressful time, maybe your kids are driving you crazy, maybe you just need a break, maybe you're a single parent to 4 kids, whatever, a single parent to 1 kid, maybe 1 child, you just need a break. Maybe you're trying to shop for apartments and it's just a pain in the butt to have your kids along. Call us. We have families that are willing to take in your kids for the weekend if need be, as a safe family, so that maybe your frustrations don't get so high that might lead to hitting your child. That might lead to abandoning, right, leaving your child at home because you just can't handle it anymore. This is human stuff, right? None of us are that far from these things happening, right? This is just human stuff that happens. So how can we as a community support them? That's this Safe Families, right? They've talked about having a mom that was a single mom that needed to go into recovery. She relapsed. There was a family that kept her kids in their home for 3 months while she did residential care for that, but she didn't have to have her kids end up in the system, which matters so much. What a gift. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's a weekend, maybe it's months. If you have people that are passionate about, Olive Crest has offices all around.
No, they have
right? They have,
What's the name of it?
Olive Crest. But we as Kingdom Causes, we say, man, you're doing something good there with families. We know that families are key to people staying housed, right? So how do we support you? Well, let's reach out to our network, see if we can get a gathering together. Olive Crest, you come and talk about it. We'll host it at KCB and see if we can get more families signed up for this from our network that we have. We know different people than you do. Let's see what we can do. That's one way of an example of highlighting the work of another person, right? How do we do that? Well, KCB, we're not doing it and we won't ever do it. That's not our skill set. Plus, it's already happening in the community and it's happening well. We don't need to reinvent that. There's no point, right? So how do we highlight that work of other people? There is an article in here. It's again not attached to the main document, but the first page looks like this. I don't remember the rest of. Are we okay?
We got 20 minutes.
Okay. This document, I'm not going to go through it too much, but community listening is essential as you try and discover the assets of your community. This article gets very, very practical on how you do that. Is it in groups? For what motivation? Why? Where? When do we do this, right? This is a really good article for that. I would encourage you guys, as you're getting to know, maybe you identify a place where you're gonna be. however you can, once you are there, start listening. Start listening, gather people around food. Go ask them questions, right? Develop a survey, something like that, whatever it is, to say, hey, what do you love about your community? What are things that you might want to see change, right? What makes you proud to live here, right? What things do you want to tell us? And we're kind of new to this particular neighborhood.
Yeah.
What history do you hold here, right? This is kind of a really practical guide to how to do that, okay?
Well, can I just piggyback on that too? And you can talk to Rudy about this as well, and James also. I think when you're planting, and I say this with like full understanding of what it takes to preach and what Sundays take, but that's the easy part.
Yeah.
Because that's what we know how to do, right? And that's like really kind of what we're thinking of, like church. This is the hard part, and so it's like tempting to be like, let's start a church service, right? Like, and how do we do everything to lead up to that church service? And then, but this stuff is like the undergirding of like all, you know, I mean, the gospel is undergirding all of it, but it gives like, I think it puts to use some of the things that's going to already be going on in people.
Yeah.
And it's hard to like start that stuff up if you weren't already doing it.
Yeah.
And it's different from we're coming and providing something, right?
Yeah.
We're coming in and we have Jesus. Jesus is there. Let's find him.
Yeah.
Right, let's find him and see how we can make that community happening, and then shine that light even brighter. That's what you guys are going to be about, right?
Yeah.
Jesus is working, but how do we shine that light some more and create a place maybe for people to gather, or create a place to inspire people to continue in that, right? But it takes that defense down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That people have of like, oh, you actually want to know me? You
Yeah.
think that I have something to offer here? You trust that I have lived here for 10 years and have some knowledge of this community. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for honoring me,
Yeah.
right? By knowing that. Chrissy is really good at asking this question, though, what makes you proudest to be in the community, right? It's a really cool question. It's really fun to see what people answer with that. There's another handout in here. This is something I would highly, highly encourage you guys to do as you go into a community. This is, again, we unashamedly steal, borrow, and give credit. So Michael Mata is somebody who is amazing at doing community, what does he call it? It's listening and stuff like that, but he calls it this class that he teaches at a seminary called Mailboxes, Stucco, and Graffiti. And he says basically you can learn everything you want to know about a community by mailboxes, stucco, and graffiti, okay? But then he goes into all of these different things that you can do. So he would say, right, you go in a community, there's a house, it has one mailbox. That probably signifies that it's a single family home. That same house has two mailboxes. What does that signify?
They have a rented out area.
Yeah, maybe a rented out area. Maybe it's a duplex, right? That's interesting, okay? Now that same size house next door has 4 mailboxes. Shared housing, maybe, different family units. Oh, this starts to tell me about my community. This might not be single family homes here. Interesting. So multiple people are living together. Are we looking at like working class, like trying to make it people that are barely able to make, I mean, all of us are kind of in Southern California, right? But what does this say about that? When you see a huge box of all different mail slots, probably means apartments, right? How many of those do you have? How many people in your community are renters? Essentially what that means to me is how many people really have unstable housing. You don't know when that rent is going to go up. You don't know when you're not going to be able to afford it. You don't know when that person might sell that property, right? And they're saying everybody out because the new owner wants to start at a higher level of rent and they can't do that legally unless all of you guys find another place, right? All of these things. Those just, they signify different things. Stucco. How old is the community? Is there stucco chipping off the walls? Is it brick? Is it wood? This tells stories about the community, right? Graffiti, he'll teach a whole class on this. I was so fascinated by this because he lives in Koreatown, right? But graffiti isn't just gang related, right?
Yeah.
There's murals, there's political graffiti, there's all types of different graffiti, right? But he talks about how that communicates, right? Is there graffiti that's been graffitied over?
Yeah.
What does that say in that area?
Yeah.
Is it gang graffiti over other graffiti? He says this and I love it. He said, yeah, you know, all of a sudden gangs started tagging over each other. So I tell people, if you're in that area where there's tags over tags, don't stay there long. That's contested territory.
Yeah.
You don't want to stay there, right? What do you learn about your community by looking at these things? He talks about buildings having manners. What do they communicate by you just looking at that building? Does that say I'm welcome here? Does that say that this is open? If you guys start meeting in a home or something like that, how do you make that home have that kind of curb appeal that says, we welcome you with open arms here?
Yeah.
Right? I would love, love, love for you to walk through your neighborhood and just take notes of the sights and the smells. What signs do people have on their yards? Are there toys in the yards? Oh, is this a family neighborhood? Right? Are there porches? Do people sit in them? Or is it just driveways to garages? How do we create community in this space when people come home, go through their garage, straight through their door inside their home? Right? These are all things your community will tell you so much without even talking to them.
Yeah.
Right? So I am not the expert on this, but just looking at all of these different things, the music, what music do you hear as you go around? It tells you so much about who's in your community, right? When's it louder? That tells you a lot about your community too, right?
Yep.
Really, really good practice. I think this would be one of the most exciting, for me, exciting things that you guys could do as you enter a neighborhood and plant the church, okay?
Good stuff.
This is just an idea of asset maps. So as you walk through your community, I would love for you to write down what are assets as we walk through here, right? Do we have parks? Right? Do we have sidewalks? That's an asset.
Yeah.
Right? Are there schools here? If there's schools here, man, if we're planting a church here, let's adopt this school as a place that we want to love on well, right? Are there businesses here? Is there a hospital here? Is there a retirement home here? Take note of all of that stuff. Is it mom and pop shops? Are there chain restaurants? Do we have a candy store that's made it through COVID? That's cool, right? Like, what are these different things? Asset map your community that you're in. Know its strengths, right? And then our thing that we gotta do is connect these pieces together, right? The individual assets of the church that you're part of, the people that make up that church, connecting with the community assets, connecting to strengthen what's already happening in the community. By the very fact that you are doing this, you will connect assets to needs. It will happen, okay? This is a book that is pretty weighty when helping hurts, but this talks about how we do ministry, how we come into different communities, how we participate in charity and stuff like that without hurting the people that we're trying to serve. So when Helping Hurts kind of breaks that down and gives you some practical knowledge on that, a lot of people after they read When Helping Hurts said, well, now I don't know what to do. Now I feel frozen because anything I do might hurt somebody, right? We also read this book at our office called Toxic Charity. Like, when is it actually toxic to hand out toothbrushes all the time or, you know, something like that, right? And so in our office, we have this joke of things that happen. We're like, ooh, toxic charity, what's happening, right? Toxic charity, ooh, toxic charity, right? We do this a lot. Because it happens, it's hard not to do it, right? After people were like, I don't know what to do anymore after reading When Helping Hurts, they wrote a book after that called Becoming Whole. And they put a field guide to that you can study together as a way of saying, no, you can still do this. How do we do this well? This means becoming whole as a community. So this is kind of how we don't want to do it and how we do this well. And then how do we get practical? If you guys want a tool, it's just one of those tools.
Also, there's a video. I was saying
sorry.
earlier, I buy books, but I'm not the best reader of the books. They have a free video series that summarizes the first book, and it's really, they have a small small group curriculum too.
Yeah.
But the videos, honestly, by themselves are just like super thought provoking and good. It kind of makes you wrestle a little bit.
We committed to send out those links and stuff like that to Charlie too,
Yeah.
so that you guys can get that
Here's
from
what you
us.
were saying.
Awesome.
Oh, the real cost measure from United.
That, but then there was tonight, you said something like, we'll send it out
Uh-oh,
about peace earlier in Zoom.
uh-oh,
Because I was gonna say, just add that to the list.
oh shoot.
I'm gonna step in the bathroom. real quick.
Yeah, we're almost done.
It's okay. Well, I'll think of it, or I won't, and it'll be okay.
So then I'm closing this stuff out by talking about shalom. This idea that we often talk about, right, that has a ton of different meanings, different words that we use for it. I just put up here different words that we say when we talk about shalom, right? It's peace, it's prosperity, it's completeness, tranquility, well-being, wholeness, reconciliation, unity. What I would encourage is just an exercise that you can do for yourself, that you can do for your church and for your community, is fill in the blank of these questions with the words here, right? So let's take unity. What glimpses of unity do you see in your life, your church, and your community? What could your life, church, or community look like if there was more unity? How can your life, church, and community be a vessel that ushers in unity? You might listen to your community and they might say, I don't know my neighbors, right? I know one or two of them, right? So how do we bring kind of this idea of wholeness, that we actually kind of know each other? Sit with them. What glimpses have you seen of that in your community? What could it look like if there was more wholeness? What excites you about that idea, right? And
This is so-
how can you be a vessel that ushers in that wholeness?
Yeah, just like this is a great thing to be able to like sit with people or yourself and think through. It's good questions.
I think, when we talk about it, we all long for this shalom, right? Like nothing missing, nothing broken, right? This wholeness, right? His kingdom come on earth, right? And so if we truly long for it, let's keep asking ourselves, do I see it in my own self? And where I don't, God, take that part and redeem it, all right? And help me to have more of this in me. Let me have somebody keep me accountable to this when they see me jeopardizing the community's peace, right? Or my own peace in my own life, right? This is a little bit different because you guys, your church isn't there yet, but if you even think about your church in Linwood, right? If that church were to disappear tomorrow, what would the community actually miss? Which essentially just gets to, what actually are you doing in that community?
Yeah.
Right? Are you just everybody showing up, walking in the doors, and then getting back to their cars and going? That might happen on a Sunday, right? But what else is going on there that the community might say, oh man, that was cool when we had that.
No, yeah.
Right? Be that in the community, right? And that goes, especially with you guys, that goes with asking. Is there anything in the community that you feel like is missing? Do that, please do that after you ask about the strengths of the community, right? And then this is just a little plug. World Renew and this organization called Embrace Communities is doing this series on faith-rooted, asset-based community, and it's community development. It's a community of practice where people are gathering all around North America to talk about how they're trying to do asset-based community development in their religious organizations and churches, and talking about, hey, what's going well for you? What was hard? Where are you having challenges? So I just wanted to give this as a resource, potentially, if you wanted to join that. But that's what we have for tonight. So